Do you know where every single dollar you earn goes? And do you know whether or not those dollars are actually aligned with your values? If you said yes, awesome, that's great for you, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little suspect because most people think they know where their money is going, but they don't actually until they take a moment to look. If you said no, either way, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Chloé Daniels, a financial coach, better known as Chloé Money Coach on the internet. I know creating a budget is something that usually terrifies people because we're all a little afraid to actually look at our spending, right? But today, I'm gonna introduce you to a budgeting technique called values-based budgeting. If you are tired of feeling restricted by your budget and you wanna know where your money is going, then this video is for you. So, what exactly is a values-based budget? Unlike traditional budgets where they can often use arbitrary rules that don't necessarily resonate with you, values-based budgets are ultra personalized because they're looking at what's important to you and incorporating that into the budget so that your spending is aligned with your values. So, let's break down step by step how to create one. Well, step number one is you have to understand your values. Now, this may seem silly because so many people are probably like, well, of course I know what my values are. They're this, and this. But do you actually know what your values are when you sit down to think about it? Values can be really abstract or they can be really concrete things. For example, when I first started my journey with a values-based budget, I remember going through my spending and being like, wow, this doesn't really reflect my values, because if it did, if my money was showing me what I valued, then it would have showed that I value booze and drinking and eating out and not putting anything towards my future. But when I asked myself what I truly valued was freedom and options on how I got to spend my time, travel and things like that, but my money wasn't reflecting that. So in terms of what your values are, what I recommend doing is literally Google a list of values and start identifying the ones that resonate with you. I want you to get really, really clear on what your true values actually are and not what you think they're supposed to be. Now, on the flip side, when we're talking about values, we also have to get really clear on the things that we don't value. So when you're looking at that list, if you Googled a list of different values that are out there, I want you to also go through that and be like, which of these things are things that I would put really low on the priority list? You've got to get really clear on what you don't value, because what we're going to realize when we go through the actual budget is in the areas of things you don't value, you wouldn't be sad if you missed out on, well, that's going to be the areas where we find found money that we can start dedicating to the things we actually value. Now, step number two in making a values-based budget, now that we know our values, we've got to go through and connect financial goals to each one of those values. So I've already kind of talked a little bit about my values, freedom, independence, travel, and things along those lines. But how do we relate abstract ideas like freedom and independence to our actual financial goals? For me, that looked like paying off my debt so that I didn't owe anybody anything. For me, that also looked like dedicating more money to my emergency fund. To me, it also meant investing as much as possible so that I could retire as quickly as possible, because I want complete ownership over my time. So when you're going through your list of the things that you value, can you tie financial goals to each one of those things? Step three is the scary step that everyone's a little bit afraid of, but we've got to start looking at our spending. So this is where everyone buckle up, we're going to dive in. It's essential to know where your money is going, and the only way for us to truly know is to actually take a look at where our money has been going. So what I encourage you to do is to go back and look at the last, at minimum 30 days, but at most about 90 days of spending to start categorizing things. I'm going to show you how I do this in my own spreadsheets. You can use something that's like as basic as a Google sheet, but I want to give you an example of kind of what we're doing when it comes to categorizing our spending. Okay, so what I've got pulled up here is part of our Lazy Wealth Planner, but you can honestly use any spreadsheet, any Google sheet. When I first started, I actually used a little notebook where I was literally writing down everything that I spent, and then I went through and I circled things on color to group things into different categories. This is a little bit easier, but I know some people prefer low tech. So what I encourage you to do is pull up your bank statements, pull up your credit card statements, and start going through them and categorizing. So what I've got here is, let's say you're looking at your statement and you see, oh, I spent $5 at McDonald's. I'm going to put $5 in eating out. Oh, then I went to Shell and I spent $50 on gas. Oh, and then my insurance came out. I spent $93 there. Oh, and then I got, a smoothie at Jamba Juice. So you're literally going through there and you're going to start adding okay, what did I spend in each one of these categories, looking at the last 30 to 90 days. I know that seems like an arduous task. I know that seems scary. I know that seems like something that probably most of us want to skip. And in working with hundreds of clients, I get it. I've been there and I feel you. But what I'm going to tell you is in the hundreds, if not thousands of people that I have coached through this, there is always a surprise when you go through and you actually look at your spending. So many of us think we know what we're spending our money on, right? But at the end of the day, we don't know until we actually look. So I highly encourage you not to skip this step, because this step is going to also be the building block for your actual budget. Okay, so now we're going to analyze our spending and decide, okay, is this actually aligned with the values that I set for myself in the first place? So if you haven't already, you're going to total up all the spending in each of these different categories, and you're going to take a look. Okay, my baseline spending in groceries is $510. Is that aligned with my values? Do I feel good about that? Is that something that I want to keep, or do I want to reduce that by maybe $100, $50, depending on what your values are? I've had many clients who things like health food and going to farmers markets and healthy eating is really important to them. So they have groceries as one of their top priorities, or they even redefine it as a health category because that's truly what's important to them. That's okay. The whole point is to be intentional as you're going through this and decide, is this something that brings me value? Is this something that's aligned with my values? If not, can I reduce it? Is it possible for me to reduce it in any way? Now, here's the cool part. By doing this, when we're identifying the things we do want to spend money on and what we don't want to spend money on, as soon as we realize, like, for example, I don't really like spending $266 a month on eating out, that's found money. That's money that we then get to dedicate to other goals. Now, we have to keep it realistic. Remember, we cannot go from spending $300 plus on eating out a month to spending $0 a month on eating out. That's setting us up for failure. And if you're anything like me, I struggle a lot with black and white thinking, and trying to go from $300 to $0 a month is a recipe for disaster. So instead, I want you to be realistic. Maybe you can go down $60 at first, and then boom, you've got $60 that you can dedicate to one of your higher value categories instead. Now, once we've done this, once we've analyzed our spending, we've taken a look at our baseline spending, and we've decided, does this align with my values or not? Now we're going to go through and do the really scary part, and we're going to make a budget. But I promise you, it's not going to be as scary as you think it's going to be. I am a huge fan of doing budgets the old-fashioned way. You do not have to do things my way, but I want to share with you a free template that's available in Google Sheets. If you just go to Google Sheets and then New from Template, then you scroll down, you'll see right here you've got a monthly budget. I have been using this since 2018, so it's nothing fancy, it's very simple, but I think keeping things simple when we're learning how to budget is really, really important. What you'll see here is a monthly budget. I personally like to base budgets off of when you get paid. I think a monthly budget can be really intimidating. And so if you are getting paid, for example, on the 1st of the month and the 15th of the month, instead, maybe try creating a budget that's just for your next pay period. So that's my recommendation, because when we look at a monthly budget, I think sometimes it's really hard to know exactly what's going to happen over the next 30 days. But generally, we have a good idea of what's going to happen over the next 2 weeks in terms of our schedule, in terms of what's on our calendar. And ultimately, our budget is to help us live our lives. We're not living our lives for our budget. So what I recommend doing is go ahead and pull up the baseline spending that you just went through, the categories that you've already figured out your baseline spending is. We're going to also pull up our budget at the same time, because we're going to go through and be like, let's say I budgeted $500 for the month for groceries. Now I'm going to look at, all right, in the next 2 weeks, do I need the full $500, or do I just need $250? Or is, something happening where I'm having a dinner party and I need to increase my grocery budget? Whatever it is, you're going to take a look at what's realistic for the time period that you're budgeting for. And I'll change this to groceries too, because food is not specific enough, right? Remember, we're trying to be specific so we can track what we want to be able to track. It's all about looking at what's realistic for the time period that you're setting. So once you go through your categories over here and you make decisions on what you're going to do with your budget on this side over here, the way you use this budget spreadsheet is incredibly simple. That's what I love about it. You can go in here, you'll enter in all of your categories and all your planned spending in those categories. And then Then over here on the right, you're going to put in your planned income. Remember, I told you my recommendation is to budget based off of when you get paid if you can. So what are you expecting to come in that paycheck? Now, ideally, a values-based budget is just a version of a zero-based budget. And a zero-based budget means we're assigning every single dollar a job. That means we're making sure every dollar is called for. So we know that if we go over in one category, we're going to have to look at either pulling out of our savings, going into credit card debt, or reducing what we're spending in another category to make up for it, because we assigned every dollar a job. The entire purpose is that everything that you have planned for income, you're going to plan an expense for it over on the left side here in expenses. Then when your budgeting period starts, it's super simple. And what I love about Google Sheets as well is that you can access this on your phone. So if you're somebody who's not on a desktop all the time, you can just, when you're out and about, when you spend money, you go into your Google Sheet and you enter in your expense. So let's say day one of your budget, it begins, you go to Starbucks, you spend $5 there, you're just gonna go in there and you're gonna put that into your coffee budget, okay? Then what you'll see over here is it's automatically going to populate. So let's say we had budgeted $40 for coffee over the next 2 weeks. Well, you'll see, okay, I've spent $5, I've got $35 left over. This is the beauty of the simple spreadsheet, the simple budget. You're going to be constantly checking it, and what I recommend is check it at least once a day. It's gonna get really hard if you decide, I'm going to ignore that budget for 3 days, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to reconcile everything. Now, step 6 is you got to be able to look at your budget, revise it, and make adaptations as needed. One of my biggest mistakes when I first started out was budgeting is I thought that my budget was set in stone. And one of my biggest tips for people who especially struggle with black and white thinking is adjust the budget as you go. You're learning a new skill. That means you're probably going to go over budget for several months. That's what I did. But the point is, to slowly stop going over budget so much and to start making realistic budgets that are actually reflective of your spending. And then you just get a little bit better every single month. Just because you can't stick to a budget 1 month or 2 weeks or 4 months does not mean that you're doing budgeting wrong. It just means you might need to make some adjustments as you go in order to make a budget that actually works for you. And one other thing that I recommend doing, because we're talking specifically about values-based budget, is maybe once a quarter, go back and take a look. Am I aligned with the values that I set in the first place? Am I following the baseline spending that I had originally set as a goal? That way you can keep checking in to see if your spending is actually aligned with your values as you originally planned. And there you have it. So that's all about a values-based budget. I hope you found it helpful. I love values-based budget. It's something that I still do to this day, and I've been doing this since 2018. Remember, it is not just about the numbers. That's why we don't care about those arbitrary rules of other budgets and things like that. It's really about aligning your spending with your values so you can live your dream life right now. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Chloé Daniels, better known as Chloe Money Coach. You can find me on Instagram at Chloe Money Coach. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to BiggerPockets Money so that you can get more videos like this. If you have any questions about building a budget, making it values-based, or anything else related to this video, please be sure to drop them down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.